Hi, my friends, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I give you the scariest paranormal true stories that I have ever come by.
True, scary, paranormal story number 1, the Tatum Hauntings.
In the mid-1980s, in a quiet suburb near Atlanta, Georgia, Jim and Kate Tatum built a new home with plans to retire. But 5 months after they moved in their home, the Tatums began to experience a series of unexplained occurrences that would ultimately force them to put their house up for sale. One dark night, Kate could not sleep, and she felt as if something was in the hallway outside her bedroom. When she got up to investigate, she saw a glimpse of a dark, black figure walking past her open doorway. She told her husband, Tim, and he searched the whole house with nothing to show for. Shortly after the incident, Kate just suspected that he may not have been an actual person, but maybe a ghost or even a demon. 2 months later, one night in March, Jim was working upstairs on the house. He stopped working when Kate called him for dinner, and he unplugged his drill and put it to the side. As the evening wore on, Jim decided to watch a movie, while Kate went upstairs to read a book. Later, Kate heard the sound of the drill outside her bedroom. She thought Jim was teasing her about having seen a ghost earlier, but before long she felt that the joke had gone on for way too long, and got up out of bed and walked into the hallway. It was empty, and the drill that was making noise earlier was unplugged, laying on the ground. When she knelt down to touch the drill to see if it was warm, it was ice cold. Not too long after that, Jim bought Kate a bell to ring when she needed something. It was an angel bell that he had bought at a garage sale. Kate had a surgery and was having trouble getting out of bed, and he didn't want her to move around too much, especially after having the surgery. One night, Jim heard the bell ring and went to see what Kate needed. He found that Kate was sound asleep and the bell had not been moved at all. After the third time of this happening, Jim had gotten tired of the teasing of the ringing of the bell. So one day, Jim and Kate were at the breakfast table, and Jim came up with an idea. He whispered to Kate that only after the bell rang 3 times in a row would he then know it was Kate, rather than it just ringing once, like it had been doing by itself. Then, and only then, would he come upstairs. That very night, while Jim was downstairs watching TV, the angel bell rang 3 times, just as they had talked about at the breakfast table. Believing this time it was truly Kate, Jim made his way upstairs. But when he got to Kate's room, what he saw shocked him to the core. Kate, his wife, was sound asleep. The angel bell wasn't even near Kate. It was on the shelf across the bed. That's when Jim knew for sure that a ghost heard their conversation earlier at the breakfast table and heard him tell Kate to ring the bell 3 times. Jim picked up the angel bell and looked at it, and then placed it back on the shelf and walked out of the room. But before he could leave the bedroom, the angel bell rang a 4th time behind his back. Jim said he got chills running up and down his arms. He said he felt as if something was staring at him, that the fear he felt at that moment was unexplainable. That this experience went against everything he was ever taught regarding the paranormal, and that he is truly a believer to this day. The Tatums, not too long after, moved out of their dream home and put it up for sale.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2, the Club.
This story I'm about to tell you was told by my dad many years ago, and his dad told me, which is my grandfather. I am now 42 years old. He told me this story when I was only 12. I never forgot it, and to this day, it's one of the scariest things that involve the paranormal. This true story took place in Corpus Christi, Texas, around the 1950s. My grandpa would play accordion. He was really good at it, but never really had the time to take his dream further. One late evening, my grandpa was sitting in the backyard playing his accordion. He was getting ready to head back inside the house when a man came from nowhere. He walked up to my grandpa and told him he played good music. The man was wearing a nice suit and had scars on his face. It looked like burn marks. He told my grandpa if he would like to join his band. The man said they would be playing at a local club in Corpus Christi the following day. If my grandpa was interested, and if so, to meet around midnight. Even though the time was pretty late, my grandpa agreed. He was extremely excited at the opportunity of being able to play in a club for the first time. He thanked the man and went into the house. He told my grandma the good news. When it was time for him to go to the club the next day, my grandpa grabbed his accordion and told my grandma he promises he wouldn't drink, and he shouldn't take too long. He kissed my grandma and made his way to the club. When he showed up to the club, he was shocked of how beautiful it looked. People were dancing and they were dressed in tuxedos. He made it to the stage, and that's when the man who talked to him the previous night with burn scars on his face spotted my grandfather. He called him over to the top of the stage, where he and the band were. When my grandpa made it to the top of the stage, the man then asked if he knew how to play the song they were playing at the moment. My grandpa anxiously told him he knew how to play the song. He followed along. My grandpa was beginning to fit right in. Everything happened so fast. He thought to himself, how could I be so lucky? One minute he was outside playing alone, and now he was in front of an audience on stage. As he was playing the accordion, he began to look at the people dancing, and he noticed something quite odd. One of the women dancing had weird-looking feet. It looked as if she had goat feet. He began to look even closer, and to his horror, the man she was dancing with also had animal feet. They were the feet of a chicken. My grandpa froze in fear. When he looked at everyone on the dance floor, he saw that they all had animal feet. He quickly looked at the band that was on the stage with him. The singer had pig feet, and the rest of the band had goat and chicken feet. My grandpa was petrified. He couldn't believe what he was seeing with his own eyes. As if on cue, the music stopped. Everyone in the dance hall stopped moving and looked at him with smiling, creepy faces. Even the band on stage. That's when my grandpa screamed and jumped off the stage, leaving behind his accordion. He quickly ran out of the club. He ran faster than he had ever ran in his entire life, never looking back. When he made it home, he told my grandma everything that happened at night. The following morning, my grandfather and some of his friends went back to the club to see if anyone was still there. As they got closer to the club, they noticed that it was all boarded up. It looked vacant. It looked as if it had been closed for years. It also looked as if it had a fire at one point. My grandfather was in shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. He told everyone that he was not lying. That's when he remembered he left his accordion on the stage. He asked his friends to please help him get in the club. His friends were reluctant, thinking that my grandpa lost his marbles. But after he begged them, they finally agreed. They were able to break through the front door. After they made their way inside, they all looked at the stage, and there, sitting on it, was the accordion. At that point, everyone believed what he was saying, and that it was in fact true. Later, he found a newspaper that confirmed the club had burned down, taking the lives of everyone in it, including the band members. The scariest part was the owner of the club that died in the fire was the same man that talked to my grandfather the night he was alone playing the accordion.
True, scary, paranormal story number 3. The entity on my roof.
12 years ago, when I was 20, I had been married for 2 years and had 2 kids. I was a stay-at-home mom and my husband worked late at night at an office job. We lived in a double-wide trailer. One night, I was home alone because the kids were visiting their grandparents, and I decided to relax and watch a movie. Our home was about a mile away from the nearest neighbor's house. It rested atop a large hill that was surrounded by dense forest. I had barely started the movie when I heard what sounded like a kitten meowing outside. I got up and decided to investigate. So I went outside and immediately noticed something wasn't right. The meowing sounded like it was coming from about 20 feet up in a large oak tree. When I walked over and stood directly underneath the branches, the meowing turned into deep growling, not like a dog, but someone pretending to be a dog. It was too dark out to see anything clearly. I was beginning to get scared, and that's when I decided to go back inside and lock the door while I contemplated whether or not I would be overreacting by calling the police. That's when I heard the loudest boom noise on my roof, followed by the most insane high-pitched scream I had ever heard. I covered my ears and ran to the bedroom and grabbed the shotgun. I was shaking with fear because I knew something or someone was trying to scare me, and this whole ordeal wasn't normal. You could just feel something was different. I called my husband at work, and just as he answered, the noises started again, only deeper and longer. He could hear it on the phone, and he told me to hang up and call the police, but I knew they wouldn't be out there for at least an hour or so. So instead, I decided to stand facing the window with the shotgun. I was shivering. After a few moments, what looked like a dark, shadow-like entity just jumped right down in front of the window, facing me. It had complete red glowing eyes. After staring at me for a few seconds, it then growled. I was in disbelief at what I was looking at, and just then I heard another sound on top of the roof, and just like the first one, another dark entity jumped down off the roof, staring right at me. It was standing next to the first one. Instinctively, I cocked back the hammer on the shotgun. I didn't want to shoot through the window if I couldn't help it, but I wasn't going to let them in the house. It looked like they pressed their faces to the window, and all I could think about was how silent it was, and all of a sudden, how pulling the trigger would break the silence. I'm not sure how long we locked eyes, but I suddenly noticed a pair of headlights coming up the driveway. I recognized my husband's car. He took off from his job as soon as I had called him. I wanted to scream out for him not to get out of the car, but before I could even open my mouth, both black entities jumped back on the roof and into the darkness. My husband never caught a glimpse of them and ultimately didn't believe me, but his mother did and confided in me that she had seen them before. She believed that they were some kind of demon. Over the next few years before we moved away, I would occasionally hear meowing from the trees and around my house at night, especially when I was alone. But I would never go out to investigate, not after what happened the last time. I'm not sure what they were, but paranormal or not, I don't think I ever want to find out what they wanted from me.
The Witch Neighbor.
About 20 years ago, in 2006, in Rosenberg, Texas, I lived in an apartment with my wife. I was about 21 years old at the time. We lived on the second floor with a balcony patio that we shared with our neighbor. Our neighbor came from New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. When our neighbor moved in, many paranormal occurrences began happening. It had only been a couple of days after our neighbor moved in that I would hear random knocking on the walls. On a couple of occasions, I would wake up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. When I entered the kitchen, I would suddenly feel as if somebody was standing in the pitch black in the living room, just staring at me. One time, the kitchen lights started flickering. I brushed it off as an electric issue. Another night, when we were getting ready to go to bed, my wife saw me in the bathroom standing in front of the mirror. She began having a full conversation with me. The scary thing was, it wasn't me. I was outside making sure the car was locked. When she saw the real me walking into the apartment, she began to cry. She looked petrified. I asked her what happened, and that's when she told me she was talking to me moments earlier, that I was having a full conversation with her. She said we were talking about our plans for tomorrow. I knew then that our apartment was no doubt haunted, and it had something to do with our new neighbor. Many times, things would randomly go missing. Car keys, wallets, and other important small items would be placed in other parts of the apartment. I only saw my neighbor one time. She was a black older lady, and she had a huge black hat on her head. We both were opening our doors to get into our apartments. When she opened her door, I looked in and saw candles that were on the floor fully lit. After she walked in, she began screaming. I then heard another voice talking back to her. It was the creepiest thing I had ever heard. At that exact moment, I remember feeling extremely scared and feeling like I was being watched. I quickly went inside, wondering, who is this woman? Even our pet parakeet bird that we had at the time went through hell. She started to grow warts on her beak. I felt bad for her. She was young and healthy, but I noticed as soon as our neighbor moved in right next door to us, her health started declining rapidly. I was not going to allow my pet bird to die like that. One day, I opened the balcony doors and reached out with my pet bird on my hand, trying to tell her to go ahead and fly away. She turned her head back and looked at me for a few seconds. I know she was trying to tell me thank you for letting her go free. Even though animals can't really talk, I do believe they know a lot more than we think. She then flew off into the sunlight. But everything boiled over one night at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was awoken by a sharp, excruciating pain in my back. It felt as if I was being squeezed, and my muscles were restless all up and down my back. I couldn't keep still. I jumped off the bed and began pacing back and forth from one end of the room to the other. I told my wife that something was wrong with my back and that I couldn't take the pain. The whole time she was telling me to calm down and to lay down. The pain was too great for me to lay down. The bedroom lights were still completely off, and it was pitch dark in the room except for a little moonlight coming through our balcony window. As I was pacing back and forth, what I then saw next shocked me to the core. I will never forget it. It was a person's shadow seeping through the balcony window. I froze still. Then I slowly crept up to the window blinds on the door and put them down to see who it was. There stood my witch neighbor, with her nose practically touching the outside to my bedroom wall. Her head was down, and her arms were spread apart in the air, palms upright. She was praying or chanting something. Her eyes were closed. I quickly told my wife to quietly witness what I was seeing. She saw the woman also. I quickly called the police to try and get her in trouble. I did not want to even talk to such a scary person. I was disgusted with what she was doing. I was also very pissed off because I knew she was causing all my pain. As soon as I saw a huge flashlight light up our balcony, going from left to right, I knew the police were out there. I looked at the witch, and she was still on the balcony wearing a white sleeping gown. She was looking down, staring right at the cop as he flashed the light towards her. She was hiding in the corner, but there was no way the cop didn't see her. For some reason, he then left. I was extremely upset and baffled as to how the witch didn't get caught. I knew it was because she was into the occult, and that's what probably helped her. At that point, the pain in my back completely vanished. I was still in disbelief as to what just occurred. Not even 2 weeks after that incident, thankfully she moved out. The moral to this true story is, be careful who you live next to. It just might be a witch.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 2, The Growl.
What I'm about to tell you is 100% true, and there is no reasonable explanation for what occurred that dark night of October the 11th of 2021. To begin with, I'm a huge fan of the paranormal and love telling true paranormal ghost stories to my kids. This particular night, me and my oldest daughter Chelsea were home alone. It was around 2 in the morning and we were both bored with not much to do. Since Halloween was around the corner, I brought up the idea to tell true ghost stories in the dark. I could tell that she was already getting bored with the countless ghost stories I've told throughout the years. I promised her this was a new story she had never heard before. She reluctantly agreed after some convincing. We went into my bedroom and closed the door. I then turned off the lights and even the fan so it was extremely quiet. I laid on my bed, which was across the room from the door. My daughter sat on the floor at the foot of my bed. I decided to tell her a story she never heard before that even petrified me. I then began to tell her the story. It was a story about a man that was in the hospital. He had just finished having surgery on his heart. While he was asleep, he dreamed of a little girl that gave him a teddy bear. She then spoke to him, telling him as long as he keeps the bear she gave him, he will never get sick again. He then woke up in a hospital bed. When he looked around the room, he noticed there was a small teddy bear next to him on the bed. His wife, who was sitting in a chair beside him, told him, "While you were sleeping, a little girl entered the room. The little girl wanted to give you this small stuffed teddy bear. She then turned around and walked out of the room." Her husband couldn't believe what he was witnessing. The bear was the same exact teddy bear that was given to him in his dream. He then asked his wife what the little girl looked like. As she began to explain details about the young girl, he started to feel nauseous and chills went through his feet to his head. It was the same girl he dreamt of. At this part of the story, my daughter jumped on the bed and laid right next to me. I asked her, "Was everything okay?" She claimed she felt as if she was being watched, as if somebody was in the room with us. I smiled and figured she was definitely getting spooked by the story. I then tried to figure out how the rest of the story went from that point on. There was a brief silence in the room, but it was during this silence that something occurred that me nor my daughter would ever forget to this very day, and it still haunts me every time I think about it. In the midst of the silence, by the foot of the bed, we heard a kid's voice. It said "growl," as if trying to scare us. My daughter screamed the loudest death scream I had ever heard. I tried to keep my composure, thinking who else could be in the room with us, and what kid would be crawling around the floor in the pitch black. No one else was home other than me and my daughter. That's when I felt the blanket underneath me get pulled. Something climbed on the foot of the bed, making an indentation. We both felt the bed go down by our feet, and we both screamed. I pulled my legs up to my chest and scooted over to my daughter's side of the bed, screaming and hoping whatever it was wouldn't continue to crawl toward us. At this point, my daughter was crying her eyes out, and I myself was almost at that point. Not being able to see what it was only intensified the terror we both felt. Just then, as if sent by an angel, my wife and other daughter opened the door to my bedroom, and light filled up the room. My daughter jumped over me and ran out of the room, and my wife asked me what happened. I got up and walked around the bed, looking under it, trying to find someone hiding or some explanation to what just occurred moments before. I explained to my wife what we were doing and what happened. Sad to say, but since that night, I have never told my daughter any more scary paranormal ghost stories. I spoke to some people who have knowledge of the paranormal, and what they told me gave me the creeps. They said telling true stories about hauntings, demons, ghosts, or anything of the paranormal nature invites and brings in entities, whether you invite them or not. Be careful when telling scary ghost stories. Even listening to them can invite them in. There could be one staring right at you this very moment.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 3. The Tallman bunk beds.
In Wisconsin, in early February of 1987, Alan and Debbie Tallman purchased bunk beds at a secondhand thrift store. They stored them in their basement. 3 months later, in May of 1987, they moved the bunk beds upstairs to their kids' room. This marked 9 months of paranormal and terrifying experiences for the family that has ever been recorded. Strange occurrences began to happen nightly. The first night the bunk beds were upstairs, their oldest son went into his parents' room claiming that his radio clock was playing music by itself and turning different stations on its own. His dad got upset, thinking that his son was being immature, and took the radio away from his son, warning him to behave. Another night, as their kids were asleep, they were awoken by something or someone crawling on the ground, portraying a dog, and growling and barking at them. Even though it was dark in the room, they could still see the outline of a dark shadow crawling in and out from underneath their bunk beds. Also, their daughter would explain that there was a fire in the room. When Alvin and Debbie went to investigate, they found nothing. One quiet night, Alan and Debbie heard their daughter screaming. They went to go see what was wrong. The daughter claimed there was a witch with red eyes standing behind the door. Later that week, Alan Tallman came home from working night shift around 2 o'clock in the morning, and after pulling in the driveway and getting out of his car, he began to hear a howling in the wind. The wind began to pick up, and the howling got louder and louder. Then he heard a voice say, "Come here," from around the side of the house. That's when he walked around to the side of the house, but nothing was there. When he came back around the corner to the front of the garage, to his shock, the garage was on fire, with flames reaching past the rooftop. He quickly went into the house to retrieve a fire extinguisher, and when he came back outside, to his shock, there was no fire, nor any indication of one. He walked inside his house and closed the front door, in disbelief, but as he reached down to pick up his lunch kit, it was thrown across the living room by an unknown entity. There was a night when Mr. Tallman had to go to work and begged his brother Todd to stay the night with his family to protect them from whatever was haunting their house. So, his brother Todd spent the night at his house. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, while Todd was asleep on the floor of the kid's bedroom, he was awoken by a noise he said was coming from the closet. Fog began to slowly appear out of nowhere. He then sat up and stared at the closet door as it began to slowly open. What happened next will forever be a secret that no one knows. A bright light filled the room, and Todd witnessed something truly terrifying. He screamed and sat up petrified with no emotion on his face. To this very day, Todd has never said exactly what he saw that night. Debbie entered the room and began to grab her children. She screamed at Todd to snap out of it and to get up. She asked Todd what did he see, but he did not answer her. He slowly got up and walked out of the room like a zombie with no facial expressions. After a couple of minutes, he finally snapped out of it and began to help Debbie get the rest of the kids out of the house. They left the house that night, and that following weekend, the Tallmans had the bunk beds crushed by a bulldozer, and not long after, they moved out of their house hoping that the ghost or entity would never ever follow them wherever they went.